Hey friends, I'm Christy, and you're listening to Rock the Damn Boat, a podcast for women who are done playing small. If you've been shrinking to keep the peace or waiting for permission to want more, climb aboard because we are going to make some waves together. Don't forget to follow or subscribe so you're never left stranded on the shore. And if you want a more connected experience, visit thrivewithchristy.com to learn more about the Thrive Collective. Now, on to the show. I am so excited by the guest that I have today. I am personally invested in her work. We will get into all of that, but love all the ways that she has come into my network. Colette Jane Fehr is a licensed psychotherapist, certified emotionally focused therapist, EFT, if you've heard it that way. She's an author, keynote speaker, and national media contributor specializing in couples therapy, communication, and emotional connection. She is the author of The Cost of Quiet, How to Have the Hard Conversations That Create Secure, Lasting Love, published by Penguin Random House. I have my copy here we'll be referencing. She's the co-host of Insights from the Couch, Real Talk for Women at Midlife, and Love Thy Neighbor on iHeartRadio's Real Radio 104.1. She is a TEDx speaker whose talk, Secrets of a Couples Therapist, was selected as a TED Editor's Pick. A past president of the Central Florida Association for Marriage and Family Therapists, and a recipient of its Distinguished Service Award, her expertise has been featured across national television, print, and digital media, including The Tamron Hall Show, Fox News, New York Times, The Wall Street Journal, Newsweek, and Oprah Daily. You are a busy lady, Colette, so I'm so grateful you could be here today.
Thank you so much. God, I know that listening to your own bio is sort of an insufferable experience. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here and talk to you today.
We are both on Substack, and I have a mutual connection through Ellen Share. And so when I first got involved with Substack, Ellen was one of the first connections I made. Substack's one of those things, you see what other people like. Your post about becoming a published author, traditionally published author at 52 was so inspiring for me.
Thank you.
You talk about growing the platform to get that deal because you really wanted to go traditional routes. So what did that look like? Where did that dream start, actually? Was that a childhood dream?
Yes, it was actually. I always wanted to be an author. In fact, my original inspiration as a kid was to be a full-time writer. I wanted to write mystery novels. I was a big Nancy Drew reader as a kid. And I had a pen name, which was Sarah Lashes, like eyelashes. I don't know why, but I was really into it. And I would even write on, loose leaf and tie it together with ribbons and kind of publish books and make my parents read them. So this goes way, way, way back.
I love it.
Yeah. I mean, it was my whole identity. And then of course, life has a way of getting in the way. I was going to go into the magazine business was kind of how I geared my career originally, and I wanted to write in the magazine business, which was a big business in the 90s, not as much now that everything's digital and things have changed so much. But I ended up I couldn't type. And when I went for an interview with Condé Nast, they were like, you type 19 words a minute. And I was like, I didn't know I needed to know how to type. They're like, yeah, you don't start out the feature writer of the magazine. You start out the assistant who types up everyone else's stuff. So they suggested I go into advertising. And that was actually my first career. And I really never got back to writing. But then I became a therapist after my divorce, which also very much inspired my book. And I started to think about writing a book, a nonfiction book about what I've learned being a couples therapist, because I was seeing the same patterns, and they were the same patterns I lived in my first marriage. And I was also seeing that people aren't even really aware of this pattern as much as it exists. And I started to think, what if I resuscitated my dream and that this is how it was meant to go all along? That I was meant to go on this circular journey of becoming a therapist first and having these experiences so that instead of a mystery writer, I could share this knowledge with the world. And still, I kept kicking the can down the road because you're too busy, right? Life interferes. I have a busy practice. I love being a therapist, but it's a tiring job. I don't have a lot of battery at the end of the day to start writing a book. And then finally, I found an old journal where in 2018, I had written, this year, I am going to write this book, meaning The Cost of Quiet. And when I found the journal, it was the beginning of 2023. At that point, I started setting my schedule, all this stuff us writers read about, are you like a pantser? Do you sit down to write? Or I realized that for me and for a lot of us, if I did not put time on my calendar, get up early, decide that I was going to clear my weekends, that I would never write the book. And so I just sat down and wrote it, what they call the shitty rough draft.
Yes.
I just got it all out. It was a hot mess, but it really helped me coalesce the idea. And then I began to think, because this is a nonfiction book where I'm a subject matter expert, it would be really cool to get a traditional deal for this. But everybody was saying it was impossible. But that's when I decided to go for it with a traditional publisher. And then all those pieces came together. And in many ways, I feel like I got very lucky.
That's incredible. You're right. There's so many authors' dream, and we'll just kind of touch on there's traditional, there's self-publishing, there's hybrid. Any other authors who are out there, writers, know what we're talking about. So it is a big deal. And I admired what you talked about with just you were told you need to have the platform, which we hear these days. And so you made that effort to build that platform. And that's part of where the podcast came in. Am I right?
Oh yeah, 100%. So much of what you read in that bio all started because my publisher really scared me. Now, I did get my contract before I had a platform, which is very unusual. And I like to chalk that up to my powers of persuasion, that and how amazing and important the work in my book was. But it was an uphill climb. And even my agent had said to me when she took me on, I think you're great. I think what you have to say is great. The mission of Cost of Quiet, of how we avoid these conversations. And in the long run, that's what destroys our relationships and our well-being. She related to also from her own relationships. So she was like, I think this needs to be out in the world. But I had no platform. I had no Substack at the time. I had 300 friends on Instagram. You don't have to have social media, but if you don't have social media, you have to be a professor at a school, somebody who's already on a speaking circuit. At that time, I wasn't doing media. I wasn't podcasting. I was just a private practice therapist holed up in my little cocoon of an office, which you can see right here. And when they gave me the contract, and part of my proposal was, if I get this, I will work really hard. I'm already underway. I had hired a marketing person. I got a new website. I learned how to make social media videos, and I've built up, I have 35,000 plus on Instagram, more than 10,000 on TikTok. So all of that is very new. I started a podcast that ended up leading to the radio deal. I started working in TV. So a lot of things came together once I decided that I had to find a way, or my book, sadly, it's not just Penguin Random House, but my book wouldn't get out there and nobody would know about it.
Yes. And we'll get into the meat and potatoes of the book. It definitely spoke to me. And I think that's what this podcast is about. Now, certainly I started it and called it Rock the Damn Boat because I was making a corporate exit. And so that for me was kind of this big, big thing. And it helped me challenge my status quo. But I really had to look at where else am I being quiet and leaning into other people's expectations of me. And now my platform or my audience has become very much women who want to step out of their comfort zones or speak up and it's so hard for some of us. So,
Yes, yes. And I have to say that even though I wrote the book for women because I'm a woman and this was my experience, it really is generalizable to everybody. And certainly there are men that struggle with this too. But we have this added layer as women that we're really conditioned. In the book, I call it good girl-itis. It's like a disease, and we don't even know that we're being conditioned by it. But from the time we're little girls, the way people respond to us, we're incentivized to be nice, to be giving, to put our needs last. And we're punished by societal narratives and by the way people react to us when we rock the damn boat. We're often punished and we're called a bitch or difficult or too much or dramatic or irrational, or the list is long. And so
yes.
there's that added layer. And then, we are nurturers. We are relational. We want to connect. We don't want to say things that make our relationships fraught with tension or push people away. So all of that piles onto the wiring that's already in our nervous system, where everybody is a bit avoidant, because when a relationship matters, it's so wired down deep that, we want to stay connected and we don't want to upset anyone, that it's hard for everyone to say something. So there's lots of layers to this.
Yes, I appreciate all of that, you discussing sort of that spectrum of things from a therapist point of view. I'm very much an empath, and I've read scientifically they might have more mirror neurons. And so I feel everything. If someone's upset, I'm going to feel their energy come back. And that definitely makes it hard for me to say things to people.
I relate to that. I am very much an empath too. No surprise then that I'm a therapist. If you're sitting with me and you started crying right now and describing something, I would be crying too.
Yes.
And that's that limbic system resonance. And the mirror neurons are powerful. And this is why vulnerability is so connecting. But it does also mean that we can be more easily contaminated by painful emotions. It's beautiful for bonding. But yeah, I mean, the good news is you can be so empathetic and feeling and also learn by creating new habits around it that you're not responsible for other people's disappointment and that it's okay. I think it's hard, but it
Yes.
really is so empowering on the other side of that.
Well, your book gives fantastic advice for anyone, but especially those of us who have trouble speaking up. And it launched February 3rd, and you've been on a whirlwind of promoting the book and getting to see it in person. I will flash it again up on the screen because it's so beautiful. So how did that feel?
Good. I mean, I have to say then all that hard work, because the process was really tough on me. I had to basically rewrite the book, and then you edit, and then you're trying to build a platform, and then you have to do so much to market. One thing I will shout out for anyone who wants to write a book, I encourage everybody to do it. It's just a great personal goal, whether you're a writer or not. But whether you self-publish or do a big five traditional publisher, it's all on you. The traditional publishing days of the past were Penguin Random House. I mean, yes, they send out a press release. Yes, they edit my book and they design my cover, and I don't have to upload my thing to Amazon. But the promotion of the book is going to be on you. And in today's crowded space, it's a lot of work. So it was kind of a scary season for me. I felt a lot of pressure, but then it ended up also being, multiple things can be true at once. It ended
Yes.
up also being really fun. There were some great highlights, getting to go to New York and being on the Tamron Hall show for a whole hour and giving feedback to clients. And she gave my book out to the whole audience. And I had a big launch party where we did a live podcast. I got to go to Godmother's, which is this really special bookstore in Montecito, California, that like Oprah's best friend opened. And We had just a beautiful experience there. So many, many events that were really amazing. And the best part was just connecting with people who were excited about the book and getting to have these author talks where people, just like what you're saying, where people would say, this is what shows up for me. This is what makes it hard for me to speak in these key moments. It was so rewarding.
I love, even on a small scale with the podcast, getting to meet new women and make those connections. So you get to connect with your readers in that way. I'm certain I'm one of many who have given positive feedback on how that helped you. So I do want to dig into the content of the book so that we inspire anyone to read the book, but especially those who need to rock the damn boat because they're keeping quiet in their relationships. Your introduction, I feel like, pegs me and a lot of my listeners, says conflict avoidance, the silent killer of relationships. You've talked about this all comes from your therapy office, but how often do you see that show up in sessions?
Yeah, so this is really the thing that destroys relationships. And I would say almost all roads, if not all roads, lead to this. Now, it's confusing to people because, first of all, the cost of quiet, I like the alliterative effect, and it's kind of a lyrical title rather than literal. I am the least quiet person alive. I'm very communicative. I'm chatty Cathy, as you can probably see. I never think of myself as quiet. And most of the people in my office who avoid these conversations are emotionally intelligent, empathic, they're connected. And when it comes to women, especially, most of them would say, well, I do communicate or I try to communicate and it never lands. It never goes well. Part of my challenge is people don't really realize till they're reading the book sometimes that this applies to them. It's not that you're quiet. It's not that you don't try to communicate. It's that in little moments when you get a signal from the other person, let's say a partner, but it could be anyone, a colleague, a family member, a friend, that they're not liking what you're saying, or it feels charged, or it feels tense. In 1/600th of a second, we tend to read that as a danger cue. And before we even know it, that's how fast our nervous system operates to try to keep us safe. Our mind is probably throwing us a thought that just feels factually accurate. Like we don't know that we're scared. It happens that quickly. But our mind says, oh, this isn't going to go well. You know what? It's probably not that big of a deal. It's certainly not worth it. Well, I would say something if I thought they could receive it, or I tried, right? So there's lots of reasons that we may go quiet in these key moments. But there's also, as I identify in the book, there's so many different ways we avoid, and they're not all suppression. We might criticize and blame instead of actually just really naming our deeper feelings. We might distract ourselves and numb out with Netflix or alcohol or shopping, or in some cases, affairs, instead of addressing the problems. So I just want to say that there's lots of different ways we avoid, and you'd probably recognize yourself. I give the top 10 avoidant strategies, and they have nothing to do with attachment styles, which we can also talk about. But at the end of the day, what happens is that most of us, it's not instinctive. So unless you were one of the very few lucky people who had these really communicative parents, which is almost nobody, you probably never learned to do this until you go to therapy or read books, which is to really get in touch, connect to yourself, and go inside yourself and learn how to know what's happening in different parts of self. What's your surface reaction? What are the deeper things? And really to communicate from that place vulnerably and assertively. And when people don't do that, they start to avoid. It creates distance and disconnection. Resentment builds. We start to feel like, as women especially, we become burned out pursuers, right? We feel like we've tried and tried and tried, and often we're not really saying it as clearly as we think we are. And then all this distance and resentment builds. And so this thing you're doing, avoiding something that feels like it will start a fight, you're actually trying to protect the relationship. But in the long run, it creates distance, disconnection, and resentment. And all of that really poisons the bond, so that sometimes by the time people realize it can be too late, right? It's just ruined. The bond is totally ruined. Now, a lot of times it's not too late. It can be brought back, but this is the thing. I'll work with women coming out of these marriages and they've been drinking their own resentment for so long that it can make you sick physically and certainly emotionally.
Absolutely. I am sober 8 years and a 12 step. And so
Congrats.
resentment is, you would hear a lot
Yep.
about resentment is drinking the poison and waiting for the other person to die. So
Exactly.
everything that you're saying mirrors what I would hear. So I'm probably more aware of my resentment than maybe others who haven't been through 12-step program or anything. So I definitely try to pull myself out of that resentment. But I know the space that you're talking about because we get frustrated and angry when we're the ones who are not communicating effectively. I loved what you said. Tell me that phrase again.
Burnout
Was
pursuer. Yes.
burnout pursuer.
So I don't really get into that much in the book, but it's a therapy term from emotionally focused couples therapy, which is a model for couples therapy that's based on attachment science and the science of bonding and basically helping people to be more responsive and engaged in distressed moments. Because when you can do that, most things in your relationship can get figured out. But the burned out pursuer, this was me in my first marriage. And this is where you're fighting so hard for the relationship. You care so much. You want to address problems. You want to repair. You want to be heard and understood. But maybe you don't communicate as well as you think. Maybe you do. And that's part of what I address in the book too.
Yes.
But just sticking with the burned out pursuer is that you're trying so hard and it feels like nothing gets anywhere. And so eventually you're just exhausted. If you perpetually feel like you're being wronged and there's nothing you can do about it, yeah, we have to always be challenging ourselves not to collapse into victim mode. But resentment is going to come. Like it's a normal emotion for those conditions. And usually it's misdirected anger because what we have to actually do is make some kind of change. And the burned out pursuer is that woman who's tried sometimes for years, usually for a really long time. And finally she begins to detach. And it goes into contempt, like real, like anger, animosity, and then eventually detachment. And that's where a relationship's really in trouble when a wife in particular, anybody, but this doesn't tend to happen with men as much at all. When a woman becomes indifferent to the relationship, basically she could give a flying, you know what? I don't know if this is a cursing podcast, so I'll try to behave myself. That's when you're really in danger.
That makes so much sense. I can recognize the burned out pursuer in some ways, looking even at past relationships, and you think you're trying, but maybe you're just throwing a little bit out there and not having a fully engaged conversation leads to resentment. Now, is that avoidance the same as what you talk about, the avoidant attachment style?
Yeah, so no, this is different. And that's why I think it's probably confusing to people, the whole idea of avoidance, because people talk about attachment styles so much now. But avoidant attachment is really a pattern of psychological relating. What I'm describing in The Cost of Quiet, and both are important, but is avoidant behavior, where, we just, at the end of the day, we don't assert ourselves. If we don't get responded to, we tend to just go, okay, well, I'll take my cookies home and eat them by myself, right? I'm not going to stay engaged here. And it's our job as emotionally mature adults to advocate always on our own behalf. I'm not saying it's always easy. Avoidant attachment style is when people really fear closeness and true emotional intimacy, and they're often not aware of it. So if somebody, and I'm simplifying, but really this is it, that if somebody gets too close, it can feel suffocating, it can feel scary, and it's not usually that people who are more avoidantly attached will go, oh no, I'm scared because you're getting too close. It's just more of like a natural distancing that happens. But they tend to not really want to engage in any of these conversations, anything unpleasant. Your emotions may be actually very dysregulating and genuinely too much for them, not because there's anything wrong with you or because you are too much, because they haven't learned how to sit with emotions. And these things can have a lot of rootedness in childhood experiences. And I get into a lot of that in the book, how to understand your attachment style, and that you can be very anxiously attached and still do a lot of these avoidant behaviors, which is very common. But also that it's not just childhood, it's earlier romantic relationships. It's our personalities to some degree, what we've inherited genetically. There's a lot of factors. But for the most part, if when you were young, you had a parent or caregiver who, when you were sad, came to you and said, "Oh my gosh, you look so sad. What's wrong? Tell me all about it. Come sit on my lap." You cry as long as you need to cry. And they were looking in your eyes and touching you and safe and soothing and accepting when you were upset. Most likely you're going to have a more secure template because you were responded to in that very emotionally attuned way. So few people got that. I mean, generationally, it didn't even, I have very loving parents, but they didn't really do that. You know, I'm 52. That wasn't really a thing. I like raised myself on the streets, right?
Right.
Come home for dinner.
Gen X latchkey kids. That's what we are. Yes.
When I was sad, my parents were like, "Oh, it's okay. All right, get back out there. You're fine.
Yes.
You know, like dust off your tears, pick yourself up by the bootstraps. You're good. You're strong." Again, nothing wrong. It's just that's how they were raised. That's what they thought a loving parent should do. But we really need that emotional attunement of another close, safe, reliable loved one. We regulate best when we have that. And so if you've had that, then your natural state is when you're upset, you want to move toward a partner or a friend or a sister or whomever and say, "I'm so sad. Can you be with me in this place?" Unfortunately, a lot of people don't know how to do that. They've never experienced it. And that can be a big challenge to our communication patterns.
Like you said, you go into attachment styles more in the book. It was all very interesting to me. I find myself being avoidant at times. I'm very independent. I'm genetically independent. So it's just one of those things. So you'll resonate with whatever you need to read in the book. I also want to talk some about your approach, and it's a good segue. You're talking about being connected and compassionate and having this soft energy. I love throughout the whole book, especially as a yoga teacher, that you talk about getting to this very mindful space, and you call it the sage self. So tell us a little bit about the sage self.
Yes. Okay. So this is what I hope everyone gets out of the book, no matter what angle they're coming at it from. It's really been life-changing for me. And I pull this, of course, from evidence-based therapies, and just this is my own term, but this isn't necessarily my own thing, is this idea that we all have, you know, reactive, protective parts of self that come out in key moments when we're upset, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, right? Regardless of attachment style, it's just very automated survival mode. And then we have vulnerable parts inside, like our little inner children that we carry with us. Your brain's job is to remember everything that's ever happened that was hurtful or could potentially kill you, right? Rejection and abandonment is coded by the nervous system as death. It is that awful to your nervous system. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it really is, like, because going way back, if you were rejected by the herd, we're herd animals, you would die. You're much more likely to survive in a pack and with your people. So when someone rejects you, or you think someone's rejecting you, or you think someone might be about to reject you, which much of the time it's our perception, our anticipation, and our fear, your nervous system's going to send you into all of these places. And our job isn't to prevent that. Nobody prevents that. That's what it is to be human. Our job is to notice when that's happening and really be in communication with those parts and those messages, and then operate from our sage self. So as you said, this is our place of inner wisdom. It's our most mature, loving adult part. And it's the part of us from nervous system regulation that we're grounded, we're regulated. And that means we're able to express ourselves clearly and calmly. Even if we're angry or upset, we can speak for our anger, but we're also able to listen, take in another perspective, be curious about it. We don't have to agree with it. Much of the time we won't, especially when it comes to personal situations or what actually happened, which doesn't matter because it's always subjective. But we're
Yes.
able to really tap into that core and say, okay, what am I feeling right now? What am I needing? Right? There's a part of me that's really scared. I need to soothe that part. I need to offer myself compassion and validation. And this is a big missing piece that sets people up for failure in communication, is that we need to pause and do our own work first before we have these conversations. We need to pause and process our feelings, get curious about them because they're going to give us messages about what we need. And half the time people go into these communications, they don't even know what they feel or what they need. A lot of times what we need is emotional. It's not even behavior change. We need to hear that we matter. We need to know that we're being understood. We need to hear that nobody's about to leave us if we reveal a part to ourselves, or that it's okay to make mistakes. And we forget to tap into that and ask for it. So we've got to do that work inside first. And when we offer ourselves a lot of compassion and grace and validation, and we can get curious, and I give a tool called the Self-Connected Blueprint. It's almost like an emotional Mad Libs where you really
Yes.
write it all out so that you're super clear by the time you go to a partner or friend or whomever and say, this is what happened. The focus should be not on the other person and their behavior, because that almost guarantees defensiveness or dismissiveness, right? They feel like they're being attacked or it's not what happened. And instead, the focus is on, I'm going to speak to you from my sage self, the wise, loving part of me, on behalf of what I experienced inside. This is what happened in me, and I'm willing to reveal more of my inner self if you're willing to listen. And it tends to be that if we come forward with vulnerability because of those mirror neurons, much of the time people are surprisingly receptive. And that's the feedback I'm really getting from the book. People saying to me, I do communicate and I'm a great communicator and it never works. And there are going to be those cases. But much of the time, we're not being as vulnerable or as clear or as self-focused as we think. And when you do all this work first and then come forward from your sage self, you might be amazed at how even a seemingly very difficult, unable to listen person responds to you.
I'm a testament of that because, yes, you have that amazing blueprint. And it made me think back to some old work training around difficult conversations. And so it was interesting because I had a little bit of a foundation. And then
Yeah.
I'm working through your blueprint and thinking about what I need to get off my chest. For an empath and someone who has so much emotion, we don't talk as much in my household as we probably could. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to use this and I'm going to work through this example. Now, I didn't get it just right from the script, but I used that as my place of starting the conversation, and it went so much better than I expected it to, because you address this in the book too. Your mind tells you all the things, and kind of like you talked about being burned out by being met with defensiveness,
Mm.
or someone stonewalls you, or whatever that might be. Your mind is saying, well, that's going to happen again.
Yes.
And I think for me, reading your book helped me move past that place where I was like, I'm just not going to talk about it anymore, or I'm not going to talk about these things, or I'm not going to share my feelings. I needed a tool, and it might be a different tool is going to work for everyone, but I needed a tool to use and look at things from a new perspective and be able to say, okay, I don't care how many times it's gone this way before. I'm going to use Colette's suggestions and then we're going to see where it goes. And just
Yeah.
the confidence that it built from reading a book like that and reading those techniques and reading your perspectives on both sides. And so, yes, it definitely gave me the confidence to try.
Oh, that makes me so happy. And then it went better than you expected. And I think people find that a lot. And the blueprint is meant to just help you really feel as confident as possible and as clear. I don't do it perfectly either, but I even use my own blueprint sometimes when I'm really upset to gather my thoughts first. Because a big mistake we make is that we're upset and now Pandora's box gets opened and we start bringing up multiple grievances. And we really want to stick with one issue at a time and really going super slow and just, when you left your laundry on the floor, it seems like no big deal. But to me, I got triggered and I want to share with you how it landed if you're willing to listen. Not coming at you, but I do want to tell you because I feel like this is a pattern that keeps coming up for me and I notice some resentment building. Are you willing to listen? If I'm not blaming and accusing, if I'm just telling you how it makes me feel, right? I mean, this was my first husband, always did this with the laundry. I give examples from my current husband in the book. It makes me feel like that when I communicate and I ask you and I tell you that that matters to me and then you don't do it, then it makes me feel the story for me is that what I need or what I care about doesn't matter to you. And then I'm either going to lash out at you or I'm like silently cursing you out in my head. Right. And I don't want that. It's not good for us. I'm bringing this to you because I care about the relationship. So I really need to know that what I say does matter. And then if I'm going to share something with you that I need to know that you'll listen. And if you do all of that and you're really coming from your sage self and your partner can't hear you. I mean, some people have childhood trauma. They have personalities that are make this difficult. They have rejection. There's so many issues, right? So it may be that you are someone who comes forward really clearly and calmly and your partner cannot hear you. But when you're doing the work that I'm laying out in this book, that's much deeper than just communicating, you are going to be able to handle that response much differently because you're so connected to yourself. And then you have information and you can say, all right, I'm doing everything on my side of the street. I'm not self-silencing. I am advocating. I'm doing it for my adult self. I really feel very confident about how I'm showing up. I'm not letting my reactive parts take over. And still, I'm not getting anywhere. Like I'm saying it so clearly and I'm being vulnerable and my partner still receives it as criticism. All right, maybe this is the only thing that this relationship can offer me. And can I live with that? And then we might have some difficult choice points, but I want you to get that information. What happens too often is that it's a back and forth and you don't really know whether or not the relationship can be better because you stop trying.
Yes. And gosh, I knew this conversation would fly by, but it's a good time to bring up. One of my favorite parts of the book was you talk about negative partner stories. And so I think it ties into what you're saying that yes, we need to get that data and we can't let it be influenced by our opinions of our partners. And just to give our listeners some examples, you say, if I have to tell my partner what my needs are, then it doesn't count when they meet them. And there's several of these myths that you talk about that are related to us reading our partner's minds and
Yes. And
what
wanting
this
them to
one,
read
yeah,
ours.
yes, and knowing what to anticipate, but that's because we're being quiet and we're not speaking up. And you go through 10 different myths, and I really appreciated that because I've been with my husband for 12 years, and the longer you're with someone, and we could finish each other's sentences at times. And there's also times where I might not say, "Hey, I'd really like you to make dinner or pop a pizza in the oven," and then I'm resentful when nothing's on the table. So yeah,
Exactly. Exactly. And
it's one of
those
those things like I'm thinking it, but yeah.
Yes, and those myths come from, I hear these things so often, especially, well, they should know. I've said it before. And if I have to say it again, then they really don't care or they're not getting it or they don't know me. But really what all of that is, those are all automated ways we self-protect. We don't have to take the risk to be vulnerable because it is scary. And it's harder to say, in this moment right now, I need you to hug me. especially if we feel self-conscious about being needy, or if we've been rejected a lot or love has been withheld. And I'm just pulling a random example. It's vulnerable to say, I'm upset right now and I want you to come comfort me. So what we do is we think, well, I told them 2 months ago that when I'm upset, I want to be hugged. And it seems like they should remember. And if they cared, they would do it. And I shouldn't have to tell them right now. But the reality is, when we're sage self connected, when we're mature adults in relationships, not children who do deserve to be tended to without verbalizing it, that's developmentally appropriate. As adults, it is our responsibility to say, hey, this is one of those moments. And even I feel a little shaky about asking you. It's really hard for me to express my needs in these moments, but I really just want to be comforted right now. Could you come hug me? And much of the time, that's the only way you're going to get your needs met. And much of the time, our partners are very responsive when we say it like that.
That's incredible. And I think the word practice comes to mind, because I think too about using the blueprint. It's like the more you do that, the easier it will be. You can use this outside of just romantic relationships. And the more you practice with this type of conversation and back and forth with coworkers, with family members, then it just will become hopefully a little bit easier in your most
Oh,
intimate
yeah.
relationships.
It will. I mean, it really is an emotional muscle. And that's the thing. This becomes a habit. Now I couldn't do it any other way. And I used to be the biggest people pleaser out there. So I promise that if you try this, it feels so good to communicate in this way, and you'll get responded to much more than you think. Then you're going to just want to continue. And eventually it becomes the new way.
Yes. I tell my listeners through my own personal experience all the time that our needs matter. So staying quiet means that we're not expressing our needs, and then we're, yeah, always putting ourselves last or second in the relationship, and
Yep.
that's not fair to us either.
No, it's the
Yeah.
ultimate self-abandonment. It really
Yeah.
is.
Well, Colette, this has been an incredible conversation. People can listen to the podcast, so they can get more of you that way. Of course, The Cost of Quiet, which is an incredible book. I did not prep you for this one, but I always like to close my interviews by asking people who their boat rocking role model is. So, who modeled that for you to maybe step out of their comfort zone, or someone who makes you feel braver?
Okay, so you're going to laugh maybe, but this is a true Gen X thing going all the way back to the 6th grade. Madonna.
I love
Yeah.
that.
I mean, look at her now. I know people are tearing her down because we're still a bunch of misogynists, that she's out there at 70 and she looks absurd. And whatever your opinion is on that, God bless her. She is still doing her own thing. She doesn't care. She's out there trying to innovate. First of all, I went to Catholic school, so she was always like a rebel, and I loved that. And she was always, like a prayer and like a virgin and
Yes.
giving
Yep.
the Catholic Church a hard time. But I think what she really modeled for me all those years ago in the 80s, even when we were much more closed down to women's voices than we are now, we still have a long way to go, is she just wasn't afraid to whatever the narrative was, whatever she wanted to say. She's the ultimate self-expresser. And whether you love her or hate her, I really admire that. The gutsiness of it, and somebody
Yes.
who's willing to unapologetically be who they are. And ultimately, freedom comes from learning to just let people not like you, misunderstand you. As an empath, it's so hard. This is a work in progress for me, but I've come a long way. Like, we've got to live our life true to ourselves. So that's who I'd pick. That's the first person who came to mind.
That's incredible. I have yet to have someone pick the same person, and Madonna is incredible for our Gen X generation. And yes, I remember making up dances to all the songs. And
Yes.
yeah, just
Yes.
even as an empath, I admired her, who she was in her expression. And so we can take the parts of it that we want to emulate, but not feel like we
The
have
whole
to,
thing. Right.
yeah.
I might not be at 70 dancing robotically on the stage at Coachella, and that's okay.
Yes. Well, Colette, amazing conversation. I so appreciate your time because I know you have such a busy schedule, and especially, just this year and the years to come to help spread the word with your book. And so I will give all the links to everybody on where to find you. I to keep up with your podcast as well. And just thank you so much for being here today. And thank you to everyone who's listening.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Rock the Damn Boat, a podcast produced and recorded by Christy Hughes. You can follow, subscribe on both Apple and Spotify, and your 5-star review goes a long way. Thank you so much for your support of the show.